Hi students, this video is going to talk to you about how to complete your outline for your compare and contrast essay. So far, you have completed your research on both the US and a foreign country of your choice concerning their jailing system. So when you do this outline, you're going to need to keep that research handy because you'll be using it in the outline. Now the first step to your outline is to come up with your 3 P's, perspective, proof, and purpose. We haven't done this before, but it's a very important first step for this outline because you're not going to really be able to complete the outline if you don't know what it is that you are arguing. So if you're not quite sure what perspective, proof, and purpose is, which if you don't know what it is, that's more than fine. This is probably going to be brand new to most students. The perspective is simply what the essay overall is about. It's kind of talking about the prompt as a whole. So your perspective is going to be argumentative in nature because you're convincing your audience to believe something. So all of you under perspective will likely have argumentative. Then what you're doing is you're proving that the US's jailing system is either better or worse than your selected country's jailing system. So for the entire class, you're going to have very similar perspectives because you're dealing with the same prompt. It will only differ between whether you put better or worse and the country that you select. Now the proof is where your outlines are going to begin to differ. You can't write an essay about the entire jailing system of the US and then your selected country. That would be a really long essay. It would be a book. So we're going to need to narrow your scope to something that's easier to handle and easier to write about in just a couple pages. So you could write about recidivism, rehabilitation, the duration of sentences, the number of strikes people get before they are convicted. You could write about the demographics of the prison system. You could write about treatment in the prison system. You could talk about mental health in the prison system. There are so many things that you could write about. And I want you to write about whatever you find most interesting. What is most important is that you pick something specific to write about. So this student chose the US's recidivism rate is higher than that of Tuam-Tantanopolis due to poorer rehabilitation programs within the prison system. So here we see that the student is going to specifically write about recidivism rate and rehabilitation. So that is a much more narrowed scope. Then after you've narrowed your scope, you want to go to purpose. So the purpose is what you want your readers to walk away with believing after they've read your essay. What is it that you're trying to teach them? What is it that you're trying to convince them of? This student has decided to try to convince their readers that while the US's jailing system is far fairer than most in the world, it still must make improvements upon how it rehabilitates its prisoners so that they can re-enter society ready to be productive citizens. So you're going to want to make sure that you think about what it is that you're trying to prove, what you're trying to teach, and then make sure to get that down underneath your purpose. So go ahead and write up your perspective, proof, and purpose right now. Pause this video and go do it, and then you can move on to the rest of your outline. So pause now and come back when you're done. Now that you've completed your 3 P's for your essay, you can move on to the outline itself. So for the introduction of your outline, you're of course going to want to have a hook, background, and thesis. For your hook, a lot of you guys fall back on the, let's start with a question. Have you ever gone to prison? Do you think prison's fair? What are the prisons like around the world? Well, these are all pretty interesting questions, but it's kind of a cheap shot just to open with a question where you don't actually have to do any thinking yourself. You're instead asking your readers to think. We're going to push our hooks a little further this time around. I need you to decide whether your hook is going to be a current event or a historical event. It needs to be one of the two. And then I want you to decide what you would like your current event or historical event to be about. And then you'll go find it online when you write your rough draft. So you don't have to go find it right now. But this student decided that they wanted to find a current event that has to do with the prisoner's struggle to return to daily life. This makes sense for their hook because their essay is about recidivism. And recidivism is because prisoners struggle to adapt to normal life, and therefore they end up committing a crime and going back to jail. So this current event makes sense to open up their essay with. So make sure that the current event or historical event that you decide to open with relates to your story, relates to your essay. Otherwise, it will be confusing. Okay? Also, this is really important. Note what they did at the end. They said that they are going to use an individual story and that this will develop pathos. Throughout your outline, I'm going to need you to state whether you're using pathos, ethos, or logos. And you're going to need to do it a lot. So you're going to notice in the elaborations and the wrap-ups, it says ethos, pathos, or logos. And that's because in these essays, you are going to be required to use all three multiple times, not just once. So make sure that you start thinking about that with your outline, what kind of rhetorical modes you're going to want to use to best prove your point. Next, moving on to the background, the student notes that they're going to need to define recidivism and rehabilitation. You might say, people know what those words mean, they don't need to be defined. But maybe your reader doesn't know what that word means, or more likely, they might have a slightly different interpretation of its meaning than you do. And if they read your essay thinking that the words even mean something slightly different, they might not understand what you're saying. Therefore, it's very important in your background to clearly state what it is you mean by the words you will be focusing in on. Then, once you're done with your background, go ahead and move on to your thesis. This is going to be one of the 4 specific moments in your outline. Your thesis needs to be written out, all right? Not just kind of covered in notes. You're going to need to actually write it out. So this student's thesis was, while the U.S.'s prison system is better than that in much of the world, the U.S.'s recidivism rate is higher than that of Constantinopolis due to poorer rehabilitation programs within the prison system, which proves that more must be done to help prisoners prepare for re-entering society. Now, this thesis might sound really familiar, and that's because the student already came up with these ideas in their purpose and proof. If you did a good job drawing up your purpose and proof, then your thesis is kind of already made, and you just need to put those together into your thesis. So I'm going to need you to try your best to come up with a really good thesis that kind of addresses the opposition, states what you're going to be talking about, recidivism rate and rehabilitation, and then states what you're trying to prove. So kind of think of it that way. Opposition, what you're going to be writing about, and then what you're going to prove. Okay? So while your thesis might not be perfect this first time around, do your best so that through editing, by the time we get to your final draft, it will be perfect. So if you would like, go ahead and pause and complete the outline portion for your introduction, and then come back and continue viewing this video. Now that you've outlined your introduction, we're going to move on to a body paragraph. So I'm going to do an in-depth overview of the first body paragraph, and then I'm just going to very briefly overview the other body paragraphs because we don't want this video to be too long. Now for your body paragraphs, you need to make a decision whether you're going to talk about the U.S. and your topic, which in this case is recidivism and rehabilitation. Then in your second body paragraph, talk about the foreign countries, recidivism and rehabilitation. And then in your third body paragraph, compare and contrast the two. Or you might take a different approach and write about both countries, recidivism, both countries, rehabilitation, and then you could either compare or contrast those findings, or compare and contrast the 2 countries blank topic. You'd have to pick a third topic. There's a bunch of different ways you can approach compare and contrast. The way that I prefer is the first way, where we talk about the U.S. and then we talk about the foreign country, and then we compare and contrast the 2. However, if you want to do it the other way, feel free to, but this video is going to focus on the first way. Now in the first paragraph, the student explains that their topic sentence is going to introduce recidivism and how it links to rehabilitation in the U.S. Check and done. Then we come to the second moment of specificity in your outline. You need to actually put your evidence into your outline so that you know what you're working with. So here the student went back to their research notes and they copied and pasted a piece of information that they found out about the US's recidivism rate. And then they included their in-text citation. There were 3 authors, Duros, Cooper, and Snyder, and then the page number. So make sure you have your quote within quotation marks, your in-text citation, and then your period. Once the student had their evidence, they then just say what they want to do with their evidence. They don't actually write about it yet, but they say, okay, when I go and write my essay, I'm going to want to develop an argument that if the recidivism rate is this high, prisons will become more and more crowded. And then they state they want to use logos when they actually write this part of their essay. So you don't have to actually put what you're going to say about the evidence. You just indicate what it is that you hope to argue about, and then make sure to indicate which rhetorical mode you're going to use. So make sure also that your elaboration doesn't simply restate what the evidence was saying. So this student isn't going to write something like, all right, make sure to mention that the recidivism rate is high. That's boring. Yeah, obviously it's high. We read the evidence. You don't need to explain something so simple. You want to make a point with that evidence. So the author says recidivism rate is high, which means that prisons will be crowded. They make a point. So with your elaboration, don't just restate what the evidence is saying. Make a point with it. You got to actually do some thinking. All right? Think about what the repercussions or the benefits of your evidence is going to be, and then make sure to get there. So what is important about this elaboration is the idea of prison crowding, not the fact that recidivism rate is high. That's obvious. So that's part of the logical reasoning, going from this step to the next. Then you go to your next piece of evidence. So this student found the piece of evidence. Research demonstrates that offenders who earn a high school equivalency diploma while behind bars are more likely to get jobs after release. Those who receive vocational skill trainings are more likely to get jobs and higher wages after release. And those who go through intensive drug treatment programs in prison are less likely to relapse outside of it. If we could implement effective programs, we could expect to reduce recidivism by 15 to 20%. And then the student has the author's last name in parentheses because it's the in-text citation. The student then goes to say, all right, what is it that I want to prove using this evidence? So the first thing they're going to prove is why, if you don't receive those 3 things, you're more likely to reoffend. So no, they're not just summarizing what the evidence said. They're coming up with their own ideas, which is why these things, if you don't have it, a prisoner would be likely to reoffend. And they're going to use logos to talk about that. So they're coming up with their own ideas. Then the student even goes further to say, okay, now I'm going to call on ethics of the situation to make readers consider what must be done to give prisoners a fair chance after they return to daily life. And they say they're going to use ethos. So here we see that the student's actually thinking about what they want to prove using their evidence. They're not simply stating what the evidence was about. Then last but not least, the student says that they are going to wrap up by declaring that rehabilitation programs must be more widely and effectively used. So, when outlining your body paragraphs, make sure that you're thinking about getting to what you want your readers to believe. If you just restate your evidence, you're not going to be very convincing. You need to use your logos and your ethos and your pathos to use that evidence to prove something that you believe. The essay shouldn't be about what you've read. The essay should be about what you as a writer believes and what you as a writer wants to prove. That means you have to have an opinion. So if you haven't yet figured out what you think about the jailing system, it's time to figure it out, because you won't be able to do this outline and you won't be able to write your essay without having an opinion. Now, for the rest of the outline, if you would like to see how to do it, this document will be attached in the Moodle along with this video. So please go access that outline and use it as a template to complete your own outline. But at this point, this video is about to hit 15 minutes, so it is at its end. If you are having trouble completing your outline, please come see me Monday morning before school. Coming to class without an outline is not an option. So make sure to see me for help if you are not able to complete this on your own. Best of luck, and I'll see you Monday. Bye.